3 strange signs that come right before your spiritual breakthroughs. You ever felt like everything in your life suddenly stops making sense? Like you're walking through a fog where nothing is clearly defined, and yet something deep inside whispers that you're on the verge of something massive, something transformative. That's not just in your head. That's not just a coincidence. But that's the universe, the divine, the inner self preparing you for a spiritual breakthrough. But here's the strange part: right before it happens, the signs don't always feel comforting. They're not wrapped in golden light or peaceful affirmations. Often they're disorienting, confusing, even painful. But there's a sacred intelligence behind the chaos. And today, I want to take you on a journey to uncover 3 of the strangest, but most misunderstood signs that show up right before you step into the next level of your spiritual evolution. Let me tell you something I've lived, not just learned. When I was in the middle of a deep spiritual shift of my own, I didn't feel enlightened. I felt lost. I wasn't surrounded by angels, I was haunted by doubts. And yet, that exact confusion was the signal. That exact suffering was the sign. You see, spiritual breakthroughs don't come wrapped in comfort. They come cloaked in challenge, because that's what forces us to break through the pressure, not the peace. So, if you're feeling like your world is turning upside down, if you're questioning everything, if the things you once loved suddenly feel empty, you might be closer to your breakthrough than you think.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
The first strange sign is the collapse of identity. You begin to feel disconnected from who you thought you were. The things that used to define you, your job, your status, your relationships, even your beliefs, start to feel foreign. You look in the mirror and see a face you recognize, but the identity behind the eyes feels like it's dissolving. This is not a breakdown. This is a shedding. You are not losing yourself, you are releasing the version of yourself that was never truly you. It's like the caterpillar dissolving into the cocoon. It's terrifying because the form is gone, but necessary because the wings are coming. Have you ever stood in front of your own life and wondered, who am I really? Not the you that wears the right clothes, says the right things, and fits into the boxes society gave you, but the raw, unfiltered self beneath all the layers. That question is a sacred one. It's not a sign of failure, it's the exact question the soul asks right before awakening. And if you're brave enough to sit in that uncertainty without rushing to fix it, you'll find that there's a deeper self emerging from the ashes of the old. But here's the catch: the ego doesn't go quietly. It resists. It clings. It tries to recreate familiar patterns, even if those patterns are toxic. It wants to stay safe in the known, even if the known is suffocating. That inner conflict between the soul calling you forward and the ego pulling you back is not a mistake. It's the sacred tension of transformation. So if you feel like you're being torn in two, like part of you wants to evolve and part of you wants to hide, congratulations. You're evolving. You're breaking through. The second strange sign is a deep sense of emotional intensity. And I'm not talking about the kind of emotions that make sense. I'm talking about waves of sadness that come out of nowhere, bursts of rage that don't seem to have a cause, an overwhelming grief, like mourning something you can't name, or moments of joy that feel almost too big for your body. These emotions aren't random. They're ancient. They're the residue of all the energies you've suppressed, avoided, or inherited. When a spiritual breakthrough is near, your soul starts clearing space. And to do that, it has to bring up everything that's been buried. So, if you're crying for no reason, if you're feeling things you can't explain, don't run from it. Lean in. Let it burn. Let it cleanse. Because every tear, every outburst, every emotional storm is actually clearing the debris that's been blocking your light. Your pain isn't a punishment, it's a purification. But only if you allow it. Only if you don't bypass it with distractions or numb it with noise. Can you sit with your sadness without trying to fix it? Can you welcome your anger without being consumed by it? That's the alchemy. That's the doorway. You might even start having vivid dreams, strange synchronicities, or a heightened sensitivity to energy. But that's not your imagination. That's your intuition being recalibrated. Your perception is expanding. Your sensitivity is increasing because you're tuning into frequencies you didn't have access to before. It's like your soul is fine-tuning your spirit to receive higher wisdom, but before you can receive it, the old emotional static has to be cleared. Now I want to ask you something deep. What emotions have you been avoiding because you were told they were too much, too dark, too inconvenient? What if those exact emotions are the key to your liberation? What if the feelings you feared are actually the fire that forges your soul? The third strange sign is something most people misunderstand, a profound sense of isolation or disconnection. Suddenly, the people you were once close to feel distant. Conversations feel shallow. You might not relate to your friends or family the way you used to, but you feel like you're in a room full of people, but no one really sees you. You're not crazy. You're not broken. You're just changing frequencies. And when you change frequencies, the old connections can't always follow. This is one of the hardest parts of the spiritual journey, because as humans we crave connection. We want to be seen, understood, loved. But before you can find your soul tribe, you often have to walk through the desert of solitude. That loneliness you feel, it's not abandonment, it's initiation. You're being pulled away from the noise so you can hear the voice of your own soul again. And here's something wild you might notice. People will start falling out of your life. Not always dramatically, sometimes quietly. The friend who stops calling, the relationship that fades, the job that no longer fits. It's not rejection, it's realignment. The universe removes what no longer resonates to make space for what does. But you have to trust it. You have to let go of the familiar, even when it hurts. Because the people, places, and patterns that are leaving your life are not part of your next level. And your next level requires your full presence, not your past attachments. So, if you're feeling alone, know this: you're not alone. You're just ahead. You're outgrowing the old you. And soon, you'll meet the people who see you as you truly are, not the mask, but the soul. But first, you have to be willing to walk alone for a while. That's the test. That's the training. And that's the portal. The darkness that leads to light, when everything falls apart for a reason. Have you ever had a moment when everything you built, everything you trusted, everything you believed in just crumbled? Like the ground beneath your feet gave way, and you were left standing in the ruins of what used to be your life. That moment, terrifying, raw, and silent, is more sacred than you think. because what looks like destruction is often divine reconstruction. When things fall apart, it's not always because you did something wrong. Sometimes it's because the life you were living was too small for the soul you're becoming. We're taught to avoid darkness, to fear it, to see it as something bad. But the truth is, darkness is not the enemy. It's the womb of transformation. It's the space where the old dissolves and the new is silently born. The seed must be buried in darkness to sprout. The night must fall before the dawn. So if you're in a season where everything feels like it's breaking your relationships, your career, your sense of purpose, don't rush to fix it. Don't try to glue the pieces back together. What if the breakdown is actually the breakthrough? What if the fall is the way forward? There was a time in my life when I lost everything I thought defined me. The money, the titles, the praise, they all vanished. And in that emptiness, I met someone I'd never truly seen before, myself. Not the version of me that performed for approval, not the one that chased validation, but the raw, vulnerable, infinite self beneath it all. That meeting didn't happen in a moment of glory. It happened in silence, in solitude, in surrender. And that's where real breakthroughs are born, not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. One of the deepest spiritual truths is this: you cannot ascend without first descending. You must go down to rise up. You must be emptied to be filled. You must lose what is false to find what is real. And that descent feels like death. It's the death of illusions, of attachments, of identities that no longer serve you. But death is not the opposite of life, it's part of life. It's the cycle. The caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly by climbing higher. It becomes a butterfly by dissolving into nothing. And that, my friend, is what you're doing. But here's the paradox. While everything on the outside may be falling apart, something inside you is becoming clear, still, strong, like a flame that refuses to go out, even in the wind. That's your soul. That's your spirit remembering who it is beyond the noise. And if you can sit in the rubble long enough, without running, without numbing, you'll hear a whisper, a calling, a truth that's been waiting for you beneath the distractions of your old life. That truth doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, it simply waits. And when you're finally still enough, broken enough, open enough, it speaks. Let me ask you something you may have never been asked. What if your worst moment was actually your most sacred one? What if the thing you've been trying to forget is the very doorway to your awakening? We run from pain because we think it has no purpose. But pain is a teacher. It strips away the lies. It shows us what's real. And when you stop resisting it, when you stop labeling it as bad, you begin to see it for what it truly is, a catalyst, a guide. Some people spend their entire lives avoiding that darkness, building walls around their hearts, pretending everything is okay. But not you. You're not here to play it safe. You're here to wake up, to evolve, to rise. And that means facing the fire. That means walking through the valley. That means trusting that even when everything is crumbling, something higher is being built through you. You don't need to see it. You just need to surrender to it. You see, spiritual breakthroughs are not about floating above life. They're about diving deeper into it, feeling more, not less, loving harder, even when it hurts, trusting even when you're afraid. And that's what the darkness teaches you. It shows you how to trust the unseen, how to let go of control, how to believe in the light even when you can't see it. That's not weakness. That's power. That's faith. And that's the soil where your spiritual awakening blooms. So if you're in the middle of a storm, if you're watching your life fall apart and wondering what the point of it all is, know this: you're not being punished. You're being purified. You're not falling behind. You're falling into alignment. You're not lost. You're being rerouted to your destiny. But first, you have to let go of everything that isn't meant to come with you. That's the price of evolution. That's the cost of breakthrough. And it's worth every second of the pain. With the disorientation before the awakening, why confusion is a divine signal. There's a moment on every spiritual journey when clarity evaporates, where nothing makes sense anymore. You lose your sense of direction, your certainty, your grounding. You question everything: your beliefs, your path, your identity, even your sanity. And the strangest part, this moment of deep confusion is not a mistake. It's not a failure. It's not something to fix. It's a sign, a divine one. Confusion, as disorienting as it may feel, is often the final veil before awakening. It's the sacred fog before the sunrise. You see, the mind craves certainty. It wants answers, patterns, and predictable outcomes. It loves to label, categorize, and define. But the soul is wild. The soul is vast. It doesn't live in definitions, it lives in possibilities. And when you begin to shift from living in your mind to living in your soul, things naturally become confusing, because the old maps no longer apply. The tools you used to navigate your life logic, linear thinking, egoic goals suddenly become useless. And that's terrifying, but it's also the exact space where true transformation begins. Have you ever woken up one day and realized that what used to excite you now feels empty? That what used to be your dream now feels like a cage? That the things you once fought for no longer resonate with your spirit? That's not you being lost. That's you being found. It just doesn't feel like it yet, because your soul is speaking a language your mind has never learned. And confusion is the bridge between the two. It's the in-between state where one identity is dissolving and another has not yet formed. Can you sit in that space? Can you allow yourself to not know? Because that's where the magic happens. That's where the divine steps in. When you stop relying on what you know, you become receptive to what you've never known. And it's in that surrender that spiritual intelligence begins to flow. The kind that doesn't come from books or gurus, but from within. The kind that doesn't give you answers, but gives you knowing. The kind that doesn't speak in words, but in vibrations. That's the language of the soul, and confusion is its doorway. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you allowed yourself to be fully confused without trying to fix it? Without numbing it with distractions or rushing into decisions just to feel secure again? Most people can't do it. They panic. They grab onto the nearest certainty, even if it's false. But those who can stay in the uncertainty, those who can breathe in the mystery without needing to solve it, those are the ones who awaken. Because in that space the soul speaks, and it will not shout over your thoughts. It waits for you to go silent. Confusion is sacred because it breaks down the ego's illusion of control. It humbles you. It empties you. And in that emptiness, something extraordinary happens. You become teachable. But you begin to listen differently. You stop trying to control life and start cooperating with it. You stop asking, how can I get what I want? And start asking, what is life trying to teach me here? That shift in perspective is everything. It turns confusion from a curse into a compass. Some of the most profound spiritual breakthroughs I've ever experienced came not after meditation, not after rituals, but after sitting in deep confusion and refusing to run. I remember nights lying awake with questions swirling in my mind like storms. Questions like, what am I doing with my life? Who am I becoming? Why does nothing feel right anymore? And I had no answers, just silence, just discomfort, just space. And yet, in that space, something began to grow. Not answers, but presence. Not certainty, but trust. And slowly, the fog began to lift. Not because I figured it out, but because I stopped needing to. You're not meant to have all the answers. You're meant to be in relationship with the mystery. That's what it means to be spiritual, not to know everything, but to trust everything. To walk blind sometimes, with your heart open and your ego quiet. To follow the thread of intuition, even when it makes no sense. That's real courage. That's real awakening. So if you're in that place right now, confused, disoriented, unsure, don't resist it. Don't label it as wrong. Instead, ask yourself, what if this confusion is not blocking me, but guiding me? What if this is the sacred pause before the leap? Because it is. And the more you relax into it, the more you'll begin to see that you're not lost. You're being rerouted, not by accident, but by design. Confusion is not the absence of guidance, it's the presence of deeper guidance that your mind hasn't yet learned to interpret. Trust it. Let it be. Let yourself be undone. Because what's coming next is not just a new chapter, it's a new language, a new frequency, a new life. But first, you must be willing to not know. That's the cost of awakening. And it's the most beautiful price you will ever pay. The final portal, surrendering to the unknown and stepping into power, part 4. There comes a point in every spiritual journey when you realize that no matter how much you've studied, how many books you've read, how many teachers you've followed, none of it can carry you across the final threshold. Because the last step is always one you must take alone. It doesn't come with a roadmap. It doesn't come with certainty. It comes with surrender. And that surrender not to another person, not to a system, not even to a belief, but to the unknown itself. That is the final portal. That is where the real power is born. Surrender doesn't mean giving up. It means giving in to something higher, deeper, wiser than your own limited understanding. It means allowing life to flow through you without trying to control every outcome. It means trusting that even in the silence, something divine is orchestrating your path. And that kind of trust doesn't come from the mind. It comes from the soul. It's earned in the fire of confusion, in the ache of letting go, in the vulnerability of not knowing and still taking the next step anyway. Have you ever stood at the edge of a decision, a transformation, a leap, and felt paralyzed by the fear of the unknown? That moment is sacred. That fear is not an obstacle, it's an invitation. The ego trembles when it no longer has control. But the soul thrives in the mystery, because the soul knows that the unknown is not empty. It's full of potential. full of wisdom, and full of the very answers your mind could never comprehend. And here's the paradox: your true power is waiting on the other side of surrender. Not the power to control, but the power to create. Not the power to resist life, but to dance with it. When you stop trying to force life into your plans, life begins to reveal its plan for you. And that plan is always greater, more expansive, more aligned than anything you could have scripted. But to receive it, you must first release everything you thought you needed. I remember a moment in my own journey where I felt completely undone. I had lost my direction, my confidence, and even my will to keep pushing. I sat in silence, not asking for answers, but simply saying, "I'm ready to be led." And something shifted. Not outside, but inside. I felt a calm that didn't depend on circumstances, a strength that didn't come from effort, a knowing that didn't come from logic. That's what surrender does. It doesn't fix everything, it changes you. And then everything changes around you. So I ask you, what would happen if you stopped fighting life and started flowing with it? What if the thing you're clinging to is the very thing keeping you from your next level? What if the power you're searching for is not found in control, but in surrender? When the final sign shows up, when everything in your being says, "I don't know what's coming next, but I trust it," you've crossed the threshold. You've stepped into true spiritual maturity. Not because everything is perfect, but because you've realized that perfection was never the point. Presence is. Alignment is. Truth is. And here's the miracle. Once you surrender, everything begins to align. The people, the opportunities, the clarity, the energy, it all starts to flow. Not because you forced it, but because you allowed it. That's the essence of breakthrough. It's not something you chase, it's something you allow. It's not something you control, it's something you become. So, if you've seen the signs, if your identity is dissolving, your emotions are erupting, your connections are shifting, your mind is confused, and your heart is cracking open, know this: you are not breaking down. You are breaking through. And on the other side of this surrender is a version of you that is more powerful, more peaceful, and more real than you've ever known. The portal is open. Walk through it.